Palestinian militants fired thousands of rockets into Israel overnight in a surprise assault by land, sea, and air.
Palestinian gunmen are inside Israeli cities and towns.
The death toll is rising. Israelis seen taking cover as sirens wailed across the country.
The death toll in Israel now at least 900 after this weekend's violent attack. Israel declared a state of war.
אנחנו במלחמה, לא במבצע, לא בסבבים, במלחמה.
The United States stands with the people of Israel in the face of these terrorist assaults. Israel has the right to defend itself and its people.
On 7th of October 2023, Hamas launched a large-scale attack against Israel. They launched more than 5,000 rockets on Israel in a single day, in which 22 Israeli towns and army bases were infiltrated, and more than 1,500 people have already died in this attack. And now Hamas has taken both Israeli citizens and soldiers as hostages.
Militants are targeting civilians, taking more than 100 hostages.
This attack is known to be the deadliest attack on the Israel in the last 50 years. So, in response to this, Israel declared a war for the first time since 1973.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
Israel has formally declared war. Israel declares war.
Israel is at war. It has come under terrorist attack, a fiery response to an unprecedented attack by Hamas on Israeli soil.
אנחנו במלחמה, ואנחנו ננצח.
This is yet another war that could disturb the world economy like the Russia-Ukraine war, because it involves some of the most powerful players in the world like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and even the United States. And just like the Russia-Ukraine war, if this war escalates, it could have some serious consequences for the economy of India and the world itself. So, as a responsible citizen of country, let's dig deep and understand what is Hamas and why are they attacking Israel? What is the role of Iran and Saudi Arabia in this Israel-Palestine conflict? How can this war escalate to disturb the world economy? And most importantly, what will be the impact of this war have on the economy of India? People, we all know that the Israel-Palestine conflict has been ongoing since 1948. After 75 years of war, including 6 wars and 2 uprisings, the conflict still continues.
For weeks now, Palestinian leaders have been predicting that Israel will invade southern Lebanon. The Israeli bombs and rockets killed at least 25 people. Many more were wounded.
As a result, the map of the Israel has changed multiple times since 1948, and today it looks like this, with 3 relevant reasons: Israel, the Gaza Strip, and the Western Bank. Since 1948, most Middle East countries were initially against Israel. However, over the time, some of these countries have accepted Israel as a nation and have established peace treaties and trade agreements with them, while other countries like Egypt, Jordan, and the United Emirates of Arab have stopped fighting with Israel. On the other hand, Iran, Qatar, and other Arab nations continue to support the Palestinian causes, with the Hamas being the one of the organization leading the conflict. Let's delve into the detail to understand what Hamas is, why they are attacking Israel, where they get their funding, and what the broader geopolitical implications of this conflict are. The story goes back to 1993, when the Palestinians were represented by the Palestinian Liberation Organization and PLO, which were fighting against the Israel. After several defeats and international negotiation, the PLO entered into the peace negotiation with Israel through the Oslo Accord.
The Oslo Agreement was a humble interim agreement
That the security of the Israeli people will be reconciled with the hopes of the Palestinian people. This brave gamble that the future can be better than the past must endure.
However, Hamas emerged as a resistance movement against the Israel and strongly opposing this peace process. They restored to attack, including suicide bombing and acts of terror, which led to the United States designating them as a terrorist organization. In 2007, after a period of conflict between PLO and Hamas, Hamas took control of Gaza Strip while PLO retained control in the Western Bank. In the 16 years that Hamas has occupied Gaza, the region has been under an economical blockade since 16 years. And this is from both neighbors Egypt and Israel. And the conditions in Gaza are so bad that half of its population is suffering with high unemployment rate, around 50% of people living in widespread poverty, and more than 53% people facing the food security crises. In fact, Gaza receives 12 hours of power in a day from the Israel, and now after this conflict, Israel has again cut off the electricity to the Gaza.
It's been more than 16 years since Israel imposed its blockade on Gaza.
Israel's illegal settlement growth and the movement restrictions it imposes on Palestinians in Gaza led to a skyrocketing unemployment rate. In Gaza, more than half of the population live below the poverty line. Many people in Gaza cannot afford proper food, clothing, and shelter.
So, this makes it very, very clear that Hamas has no money to run and sustain itself. So this begs a question over here is, if Hamas is so freaking poor, how the hell does Hamas get the money to carry out such large operations against Israel? Well, this is where we have to see the impact of Arab Cold War turns out. The country that is funding Hamas is none other than Iran. And according to the Israeli defense minister, Iran sends $100 million annually to the Hamas, and Iran not only sends money but even provides arms and training to the Hamas to produce its own rocket using the existing technologies. In fact, Hamas leader himself revealed that Iran paid a total of $70 million to help them to develop missiles and the defense systems. But now the question here is, why does Iran funded Hamas and why it is waging a proxy war with the Israel? Well, to understand this, you need to again understand three things: the Saudi-Iran relationship, the Iran-Israel relationship, and the Saudi-Hamas relationship. So let's start with first point, which is the Saudi-Iran relationship. And here's where the Cold War of the Middle East come out very evidently. You see, Saudi Arabia and Iran are the two of the largest country of the Middle East. Now, even though both are the Muslim countries, while Iran is dominated by Shia Muslim, Saudi Arabia is dominated by Sunni Muslims. And this religious difference is started as the root cause for their conflicts. And if you look at the other countries in the Middle East, they also either Shia or Sunni majority. As a result of these countries individually either align with Iran or Saudi Arabia for their support and guidance. In this case, while Saudi Arabia, Egypt and Bahrain are of one team, Iraq and Iran are of other team. Then we have the countries that split between both Saudi Arab and the Iran, which includes Yemen, Syria and Lebanon. And between all this mess, if you see, look out after the Israel, which does not give any damn about any of them. So the moral of the story is that Saudi and Iran both see themselves as a leader of the Muslim world. And mind you, this tug of war is not just because of the religion, but also about who control the important things like oil trade and who has the more influence in the religious politics of the Middle East. This is the Cold War status between the Iran and the Saudi Arabia. So now we understood the relationship between Saudi and Iran. Let's understand the second point, which is the relationship between Iran and Israel. In this story, you would be shocked to know that Iran was actually the second major country in the Arab Islamic world to recognize Israel as the state in 1950, when all the countries refused to do so. Because back then, Iran was under the Shah Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, who was kind of puppet of the West. But this regime was not continuing for many years because they were overthrown by the Ayatollah Khamenei. This guy was not only anti-America but also anti-Israel. So again, he did not recognize the state of Israel and actively supported Hamas.
I don't know why you attach so much importance to this embargo on the United States, really.
A newspaper with the headline, Shah leaves, was in the streets within minutes of his departure.
Sadat has united with our enemies. Sadat knows well what is occurring south of Lebanon and with the Palestinians. He knows the crimes of Israel.
So Iran has a pro-West leader, but now it doesn't. As a result, Iran is now against Israel, and this brings us to the last point, that is the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Hamas. This relationship has been set hot and cold, and in spite of Hamas being a Sunni group, in 1980s Hamas maintained a positive ties with Saudi Arabia. However, when the Hamas tries to establish relation with Iran, this relationship between Hamas and Saudi Arabia get deteriorated. So Saudi and Hamas were initially close, but now due to the Iran, they are not close anymore. So does that mean Saudi Arabia is close ally of Israel? Well, not really. Saudi Arabia is not a Israel ally, and it never have any diplomatic relation with Israel. So in short, Israel has bad relationship with both Iran and Saudi Arabia. US is good with Saudi but bad with Iran, and Hamas is good with Iran but not good with Saudi Arabia. So remember this table for some time, and let's come to 2023. In 2023, the big question is, what will Iran achieve from funding violence against Israel? Well, it turns out, in the past 3 years, the United States has tried to normalize the relationship between the Arab states and the Israel. In the first time in 26 years, a peace deal called the Abraham Accord was signed between UAE, Bahrain and Israel. And this entire deal was mediated by the United States of America. And for a change, US was actually work for peace, and this accord normalized the diplomatic relation between these countries, and it was a commitment for peaceful coexistence and cooperation in trade, tourism and security. So do you realize this was a big step in stabilizing the peace between the Arab nation and Israel? So after this deal, the next step of Israel is to establish a peace with Saudi Arabia. And you know what, guys? Last month on 22nd of September 2023, the Israel Prime Minister said that he believed his country was on the cusp of peace with Saudi Arabia. This is because the United States and the Israel were taking their peace deal to the next level to also assign a deal with Saudi Arabia. Now do you see where this is heading? If USA, allies like UAE, Saudi Arabia, Israel are get closer, it would mean increase the economical cooperation, increase the trade, which would eventually lead to very strong ties, and that means Saudi Arabia will become more powerful and Iran will be isolated. This deal, which was in the making, was so significant that it was being called as the deal of the century. But now that Hamas has attacked Israel and Israel has attacked Palestine, the violence was revealed these peace talks between the Saudi Arab and the Israel. And if you see how Saudi Arab respond on this, Saudi Arab foreign minister said in a statement that the kingdom had been warning of an explosive situation as a result of the continued occupation and the deprivation of the Palestinian people legitimate rights. And a Saudi Arab expert said that this statement was intended to display any notion that the kingdom would prioritize normalization at the expense of supporting the Palestine. So the Saudi-Israel peace talk as of now is far from the reality. So in the way, Iran has actually succeeded in derailing these peace talks between the Israel and the Saudi Arabia. Now this brings us to the next segment, that what will be the impact of this war on the international market as well as the Indian economy. Well, the first repercussion which scares me a lot, as I always say, that is the wild shock. Because the last time this happened, it was a nightmare for India as well as for world itself.
Oil-producing countries of the Arab world decided to use their oil as a political weapon.
World wars among big powers are quite possible to control dwindling oil supplies,
resulting in their decision to reduce the flow of oil to America and other nations supporting Israel.
Dealers raised prices to more than 40 cents a gallon.
For those who don't know, 50 years back, in October 1973, a similar attack happened on Israel, which was supported by Arab nations. And just like today, US is supporting Israel even back then. The US supplies arms to the Israel, which angered the Arab, and the Arabs got so angry that they quadrupled up the price of the oil from less than $3 per barrel to almost $12 per barrel in 1974, and this caused a recession all across the world. So, just like Russia-Ukraine war, even this war could cause inflation and hampers the growth of the entire world economy. Secondly, the India's trade with Israel stands at $10.7 billion as per the financial year 2023, and this trade may be seriously impacted if operation on these three ports of the Israel get disturbed. These three ports are Haifa port, the Ashdod port, and the Eilat port. These ports handle the shipments and agriculture products, chemicals, electronics, mechanics, and the vehicles. And India's merchandise trade with Israel happened mostly through the Eilat port, which is located on the Red Sea. And fortunately, so far there is no report of port disruption on that area. Thirdly, the India's Middle East Europe Economic Corridor was launched last month on the sidelines of the G20 summit in New Delhi. This corridor was intended to consist of two separate routes: the Eastern Corridor connecting India to the Arabian Gulf and the Northern Corridor linking the Arabian Gulf to the Europe. This plan also includes a railway to facilitate a ship to rail transit network among India, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel and Europe. But now, due to the current conflict, these plans might face delays and maybe even get cancelled. Fourthly, as of now, a direct conflict between Hamas and Israel may not impact the India's economy. But if other actors like Iran and Saudi Arabia get involved, then our diplomatic relation with Arab countries will be heavily impacted, and this will have a direct consequences for the India's energy supply. And lastly, there is a possibility also that this conflict escalates and affects the trade route via Strait of Hormuz. For those who don't know, Strait of Hormuz is narrow waterway at the Iran's southern border near UAE and Saudi Arabia. And it is so important to the world economy that 37% of the seaborne oil export pass through this patch. And whenever tension arises, Iran has threatened to block this route and causes an oil crisis in the world. In fact, according to the report, Iran is essentially in control of the world's lifeline and has the capability to wage the unique asymmetrical warfare against the larger naval forces. So again, this is a highly speculative but quite a possible risk to the world economy. These are the possible consequences of the Arab-Israel conflict on India and the world economy. And this sums up the entire case study of story, geopolitics and economical impacts of the current Israel-Palestine conflict. And I just hope you learned something valuable from this case study. That's all from my side today, guys. Please have a look on all the study materials in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. तब तक के लिए bye bye.